first of all, it would be really cool if you introduce yourself in the language, and then I'm going to ask you the questions. So, welcome.
Miigwech. Bonjour, Waubgeshig Rice, Makwatnodem, Wasaksim Donjba. Hi, I'm Waubgeshig Rice from the Bear Clan of Wasauksing First Nation, and I currently live in Sudbury, Ontario. I'm 41 years old, and I'm an author and a journalist, and I'm very happy to join you all today.
Awesome. Miigwech Schwab. Thank you for joining us. The students and teachers at Parry Sound High School and Georgian Bay Anishinaabe Youth have been really looking forward to having a bit of time with you with all the stuff that's going on in the world. So I'm going to shoot a pile of questions at you really fast, and we're just going to do our best to answer them. So I'm going to do it in the order I actually sent them to you, so hopefully you'll remember a little bit, but there's a lot. Do you know when it was that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I think once I got to high school, I really had a great teacher when I was in grade 9 at Russell Lake College who really encouraged me to, be creative. And I'd always been sort of interested in it when I was younger, going to school in Wasauksing. We had language arts class, which was always, inspirational for me to try to, be creative in that way. But it wasn't until high school that I really, became passionate about the written word and reading and writing creatively. And then by the time I got to Parry Sound High School, I had more great teachers. Dr. Bennett was one of them, who also encouraged me to write creatively. So yeah, it sort of slowly built over my high school years, and it was always something that I did creatively. So I would go to school either in Rosso or in Parry Sound, and then go home at the end of the day and just write little short stories in my spare time, just about the things I saw going on around me, what my own hopes and dreams were. And just, I felt like it was important to document, I guess, my upbringing as an Anishinaabe youth, because I knew it was a very unique and very interesting perspective.
Awesome. Miigwech. There's a question about who were your biggest inspirations when you started to write? I know you've mentioned a bit before when you've been at our high school with the youth, but can you remind us who were your biggest ones?
Well, my biggest inspiration and biggest sort of motivator was probably my auntie Elaine Kelly. She was a teacher in Wasauksing back in the day, one of my first teachers. And when I was in high school, as I mentioned, when I became more interested in English class, she asked me what my favorite class was, just randomly one day. And I said, oh, it's English because I like reading and I like writing. And she asked me, who are you reading in your English courses? And I said, oh, like Shakespeare and J.D. Salinger and W.O. Mitchell and all the typical white dudes that were in the curricula that dominated the curricula back then, I guess you could say, eh? So she kind of just made a mental note of that. She just kind of went and sort of walked away. And then after that, though, she started giving me books like for my birthday and for Christmas by Indigenous authors, people like Thomas King and Lee Maracle, Richard Wagamese, Richard Van Camp, Louise Erdrich, and so on. So those authors became my initial sort of inspiration to keep writing, because it was the first time I saw Indigenous experiences effectively portrayed in literature. So my Auntie Elaine got me on that journey, and I'm always thankful for her.
I love that story. I love hearing you talk about that again. Kind of switching gears here on you, but we know you have your son Jequis, and you're waiting for the next one to come into your life.
Yep.
The youth want to know, how is it that you're teaching, passing on your language and culture to your kids, and why is that so important?
Well, it's really important to me because it's how I was raised. I was a kid and a teenager back in the 1980s and 1990s. And I was fortunate to grow up at a time when our community of Wasauksing, a good amount of people in Wasauksing were really reconnecting with the Anishinaabe culture and language. So I grew up with that really important influence. And I really believe it shaped who I am today. And it really inspired me to go onto the path of storytelling. So, it's crucial for me to relay that to my own kids. I think I could be doing a better job of that, though. I think when I was growing up, I remember, having important moments and carving out a lot of time in the day to do those things, like whether it's, singing some songs around the drum, or, going out into the bush and being thankful and, just taking some time to really appreciate the world around us. But since I've become an urban person, I've largely been an urban Indigenous person for the last 20 plus years. I feel like I've fallen away from that a bit. And I think, working full time has really taken me away from a lot of that stuff. That's not to say that you can't work full time and still, do important work for your culture and for your language. But for me, I want my kids to have the same exposure I did. And that's one of the reasons why I sort of stepped away recently from my full-time career to make more time for that. So, in a general day though, I try to share some Anishinaabe with my son, the words and phrases that I know, and he picks it up here and there, which is really good. Culturally, we smudge whenever we can. We talk about stories, and we have a lot of really important books that have some old stories in them. So those are some of the things I do on a daily basis, but I want to do more. And we have, with another Benoji's coming, that's especially more important to me. So, hopefully I'll be able to make more time and for the rest of my life, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. The couple of kids who sent in questions, they're kind of repeats, but it just keeps coming up about what inspires you, how you find passion. But I think really like right now, who are you looking up to as a writer, or even maybe even as a father or a partner? I think the youth would like to hear about that as well.
That's a great question. Who I really look up to is the youth, the young people nowadays who are growing up with a really firm understanding of who they are as Anishinaabe and really working hard to make sure that these ways of life are, strengthened and that they carry on for future generations because, it's much stronger now amongst the younger generation than it was for mine. So I really do believe it's possible to look up to younger people and to really be encouraged and inspired by the work they do. Of course, there are elders who did that trailblazing work to ensure that we have these things today. So yeah, I'll always look up to my elders and to people in our communities who have done groundbreaking things. But looking to the youth is always really inspiring. And when I see young people sharing their language, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter, or when I see them doing drum practice just because they want to, not because it's part of school or anything like that. It's amazing because it was a lot harder for our generation to really make that click. And it makes me very hopeful for my son and my newest child's generation because they'll have a much stronger foundation than I did and that the younger generation does now, who are making sure that foundation is much stronger. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Is there any certain writers or authors that you really, really admire right now that you would even recommend?
Oh, so many. And I'm always worried when I get this question because, I know I'm going to leave people out unintentionally just because there's such a long list of people to acknowledge, right? As always, Richard Van Camp, he's been one of the biggest inspirations and biggest mentors to me. Thomas King, Lee Miracle, the people I mentioned before, like Louise Erdrich, who inspired me to initially write. But there's a newer generation of younger writers doing really powerful things, like Alicia Elliott, Billy Ray Belcourt, Gwen Benaway, Ariel Twist, and yeah, the list just goes on and on. Tommy Orange, Katerina Vermette, Therese Mayat, just some really, really powerful works being created right now. And, Indigenous authors really taking control of different genres, right? I think the stereotype about Indigenous literature is that it has to be about, overcoming our trauma or overcoming tragedies. And I've written about those kinds of things for sure. And it's hugely important for us to all do that. But at the same time, I think we are obviously viable and expert storytellers, from across Indigenous nations. And we can write science fiction, we can write thrillers, we can write fantasy, we can write whatever other genres that, many would have believed was sort of out of our reach. We're starting to dominate those fields now. And that's really inspiring to me as well.
Wow. Well, and I think maybe, yeah, that's awesome. You have a lot to say on that. That's cool.
A lot more to say too. So.
I know, and I know we're tight for time, and I've only asked a few questions, but I'm really loving the questions that are coming up right now.
Great questions.
It's Pride Month, as you know, as well as Indigenous Peoples and History Month, but it's Pride Month. And what would you say, or how would you support a two-spirited youth that may be struggling with their identity at this time?
I would just say share your experiences loudly and proudly, and be confident in your voice, and don't shy away from speaking your own truth, because we all need to learn from you. I can't relate to that journey myself because I'm a cis hetero man, but I can say, I've found encouragement on my own journey by just making myself heard and just feeling confident in writing my own experiences and understanding that they're viable and that other people need to hear that. So that's what I would love to see from Two Spirit Youth is more writing, more sharing of experiences to empower other youth to be themselves and not be afraid of this world that we live in, and sort of the negative influences that may sort of be inhibiting their true selves, right? So I would just also say that you are loved, you are respected, and I really look up to you as well as trailblazers. So throughout Pride Month and throughout the rest of the year, just don't be afraid to share your experiences, and don't let anybody tell you that they're not viable experiences and that you have no place here. You are in the center of our circle and you deserve to be there.
Beautiful. Miigwech. Another one, what would Anishinaabe youth do, or what do you think they should do to connect with our land?
I think like as simple as just going out in the bush every once in a while, if you're able to, right? A lot of our Anishinaabe youth are urban and they don't always have access to our green spaces. But when I was living on the res in Wissahickon, if things got a little too much for me and I just needed to reconnect, I would just go down to the water and sit there for a little while, or just take a walk through the bush. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like knowing how to harvest the medicines, or knowing how to do a ceremony in the bush or anything like that. I think it's just being there to begin with is really sort of making that connection a lot more formidable, and really grounding yourself in the land and really understanding your place in it is just by being there in the first place. So that's what I do still today. I take some time, even here in Sudbury, we're fortunate to have a lot of green space here, and I just go out there whenever I can, whether it's with my family or whether it's by myself. So I think it begins there, and really to make the most of the land around you.
Miigwech. I guess that kind of answers another question of what would you recommend youth to do, coping with how the world is today? Like, how would you recommend them being away from their friends and families during this tough time that we're all living in?
Yeah, that's one thing for sure. Also, reaching out to your peers, and letting them know that you may be struggling. Fortunately, today we're much more connected than we've ever been, thanks to not just social media, but just digital communications, right? Like all having phones that we're able to text with each other on. So just trying to uphold those connections, and understand that you're not alone, and helping other people understand that they're not alone either. Because yeah, there are these growing networks that are stronger than ever. When I was a teenager, we only had the people around us, and I was fortunate to have a really strong support network when I was growing up in Wissahickon of my peers who really encouraged me to be a writer because they knew that I was passionate about that, right? So, but reaching beyond, if I really was struggling, if I was a teenager, and knowing that there are other kids in other places who can maybe help me through certain things, that would be really helpful as well. So, yeah, just finding those connections, finding those networks, and really trying to make the most of them.
Okay, changing gears again. Is your book going to be made into a short movie, film, TV series? What's going on? They love the book. We love the book.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Shmigwech. I'm glad you all love the book. It means a lot to me, really. The screen rights have been sold. There's a producer in Vancouver named Robin Cass who has the rights, and he would like to turn it into a 6-part series that would hopefully be on some sort of streaming service, and maybe even on like regular network TV as well. There's still a long ways to go before that actually happens. So right now, what he's doing is we're working together with a screenwriter to get a pitch together to hopefully get some funding and hopefully make it happen. And if it does happen, then I'd come on board as a writer as well, a full-time writer for the series. So if that comes together, we'll probably know by the fall if it's going to work out. But that's sort of the status right now.
Awesome. I know our time's running out here right now.
That's okay. We got 10 minutes or so. We don't have to rush out of here.
Okay. Okay. What do you think is the best music to listen to at this time? I can kind of guess what you're listening to, but what would you recommend everyone else and why?
You know what? Let me look at my phone real quick because I have a subscription service and I can easily access what I've been listening to lately. Oh, the new Jerry Cans album is really good.
Love it.
Band from Nunavut. There's a thrash metal band called Testament. They just put a new album out, and they have a Pomo Native American frontman, Chuck Billy. He's one of the only Indigenous people in heavy metal. So that's Testament. If you like heavy metal, Testament's a good one, and has a native lead singer. Let's see what else. Well, you know, given like the political climate, I've been listening to Rage Against the Machine a lot lately. They were one of my favorite bands when I was a teenager, and they have an Indigenous frontman as well. But yeah, just musicians like Leonard Sumner, William Prince, Isquay, Tribe Called Red, obviously. There's so many Indigenous artists out there doing really cool things. Oh, and there's a Anishinaabe rock band called Whoopso, another Nehia rock band called Nehiyawak. They're from out west. Yeah, just lots of really cool music out there. Oh, Nick Sherman, he's a singer-songwriter from Treaty 3 territory.
Have to screenshot that and send it so I can post it on the site.
I'll have to send you a big long list. Like just for example, there's a I can't bring it up just yet, but yeah, we'll I can share a list with you guys for sure.
Awesome. That would be cool. I find some platforms are easier to share with the youth than others right now, so that'd be cool. What do you like best about being a dad?
Oh, just everything. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me, you know, being a dad. The best thing about it is that I learn almost every day. My son is my greatest teacher for sure, and in our next child that will be coming, you know, in a matter of days, will sort of only compound those teachings, really. And yeah, you just really understand what's important in life. It motivates me to be a better Anishinaabe. Obviously, as I mentioned, you know, I want to practice my language more. I want to learn it properly, and I want to make more time for the culture because of my kids. And yeah, it just makes me, I think, more of an empathetic and compassionate person. And I hope it makes me a little more open-minded as well. I try to be as open-minded to begin with, but you know, knowing what it's like to share this human experience as a parent, I believe makes me closer with a lot of other humans, you know? So the journey continues. I know there's a lot more I'm going to be learning, which is really exciting.
Awesome. Wow. I feel like I got to do a buzzer on you every time, but I love listening to you talk about this, Miigwech. Favorite maple leaf?
Oh, Matt, all time would be Matt Sundin for sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, he was like, you know, he came in the '90s after they sort of had a good stretch, but then he became the leader when they became good again, right? Then I moved to Toronto to go to Ryerson in the fall of 1998, and that's when they started getting good again. And they had a really solid 4-year run there with him at the lead. And so he's always been my favorite because you know, I was in the city for those sort of minor glory years. But nowadays Austin Matthews for sure.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to combine these questions. What do you wish you did differently as a high school student? And what do you wish your teachers did differently?
What I wish I did differently was learn my language better. I wish I made it more of a priority when I was younger, because you know, I had resources all around me to actually learn it if I wanted to, but I didn't make it a priority, and I will always regret that. You know, I will for the rest of my life. So I'm sort of trying to pick up the slack now and do that learning, but I could have done a better job back when I was a teenager. So you know, I can't dwell on that too much. It is what it is. You know, I made those choices back when I was younger, and I can only hope that there'll be equal resources for my kids, you know, if they want to learn it going forward. What I wish teachers shared with me was a little bit more encouragement. I sort of fell into journalism and literature on my own. You know, I did have good teachers who said I was good at things, but didn't really push me into any sort of career. And by the time I got to grade 12, I had no idea what I wanted to do for college or university. And I did an exchange program through Rotary that sent me to Germany. And, going there is what exposed me to being a journalist, because the Anishinaabe News asked me if I wanted to write for them while I was there, right? So it was an external force outside of the school system that got me into journalism. So yeah, I didn't really have any of that in high school. So I kind of wish I had clear direction from my teachers and from guidance individuals, but just the way it is. Fortunately, I found my calling eventually, right?
Yeah, miigwech for your honesty. It's really, you've said so many wonderful things. I'm really looking forward to sharing this. It's going to go out to our youth. We might splice it up a bit so they can actually watch it, because it's so hard for them out in the bush to get all of this. And it'll go to the school board, and Georgian Bay Anishinaabe youth really are looking forward to sharing. And honestly, I know you hear it a lot, but we really admire and appreciate the work that you are doing, as you've used the word trailblazer. You're the real deal, Wob. Miigwech for
Yeah, appreciate it.
yeah, it's always nice talking to you, and I know everybody here is wishing you and Sarah and Jequis well with the next step.
Miigwech, and hopefully I'm able to visit in person sometime soon. Hopefully we can make that happen for the next school year for sure.
Yeah, we will somehow. It's pretty magical having people like Wakamon put stuff like this together to make sure we can keep doing it. All right.
Okay, well, love you everybody. Miigwech. Have a good summer and stay safe, stay healthy.
Yeah, you too. You too. Stay in touch. Bye, Ma.